really what I see the battle to come in the next 5-10 years is really it's going to be Bitcoin or central bank digital currencies. It's clear as day that nation states all around the world, this is their future. This is what they believe the future of money is, right? Or central bank digital currencies. And to kind of tie it into what you were saying about removing that correction mechanism, I feel like central bank digital currencies is just it's gonna throw gasoline on that, right? It's gonna make it 100 times worse. So does that worry you at all? What's your take on the central bank digital currency future? That I'll speak at least from a U.S. centric view. The Biden administration, that's their, it's clear as day. If you look at the presidential quarterly economic report, they dedicated 20 pages, and the first paragraph of those 20 pages basically was making the case as to why central banks are necessary, why you need a state for a currency, and why central bank digital currencies are a good thing. So what does this fight look like to you? Is the theory of the sovereign individual going to come true, where Bitcoiners are just going to flee? They're just going to perhaps leave the states, maybe go to countries like El Salvador. Is this something that you think about as a Bitcoiner?
Yes, think about it a lot. And what many people call clown world, and what many people mistakenly call late stage capitalism, I think is in truth late stage central banking. It's not surprising whatsoever that we have progressed from a country, again, US centric perspective here, a country which respected life, liberty, and property, and we had a tremendous amount of economic success. But once we had the implementation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, the trajectory has started to change, right? We've become steadily less free over time, right? This is the land of the free and the home of the brave, as the national anthem says. But once you put that institution, that anti-capitalistic, anti-human freedom institution at the heart of the U.S. economy, it starts to regress. And, if we look at communism being the abolition of private property, right? That's what Marx, that was the whole idea. From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. There are no property owners. The state owns everything, doles it out arbitrarily, in a way that is beneficial for people, right? According to their need, as he said. We've seen that fails catastrophically in every conceivable way. We also have socialism, which is the institutionalized policy of aggression against private property. So not the abolition, right? If communism is at this extreme end of no private property whatsoever, socialism is kind of the spectrum between, where you're aggressing against it more or less, depending on how severely you're taxing the population or how rapidly you're debasing the currency, both of which function as the theft of purchasing power. You're stealing from, you're violating the property of productive market actors or stealing from them. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum from communism is capitalism in a true sense, which is the institutionalized policy of respect for private property and in contractual agreement between property owners. It's not surprising to me at all that when you install a central bank which derives all of its revenues, from seigniorage or expansion of the money supply, it sells the new currency units at a market rate that they produce at a below market rate, that delta being their profit. That's theft, right? You're now violating the private property of savers, people that are depending on the currency as a mode of savings, are now having their property rights violated by the central bank. And it's a very slippery slope, right? Once you start printing the money, you now increase the misallocation of capital such that the next bust is even more painful. There's more liabilities in the system that default. So the next round of monetary printing, according to the Keynesian philosophy, is you have to print money to cover all of that. So it's exponentially more debasement of currency and theft of purchasing power from productive market actors, which is an exponential increase in the violation of private property. So you start moving along that spectrum, right? You're moving away from capitalism, further into socialism, and that private property is being aggressed against more rapidly, more aggressively, more assiduously, whatever you want to say. And the end game, right? The end game of that aggression against private property is the abolition of private property. So it's no surprise to me whatsoever that the world is moving along the spectrum away from capitalism and toward communism in lockstep with how rapidly we debase the currency or currency supplies around the world. I don't know. It's painfully obvious if you study money and you study the history of states and where they end up, but people just don't understand this, right? These isms are thrown around. Again, back to the insufficiency of language. Like, there's not a consensus on what communism is or what socialism is or what capitalism is, and hiding beneath all of that ignorance is this like sad degeneration of the world, and it's very self-defeating. You know, even the shareholders of central banks that benefit from this scheme, they're undermining the market process itself in the long run. So all of the wealth that they accumulate comes at the expense of restricting the potential of wealth creation in the broader market and the potential for innovation, the potential for human flourishing. So I'm reminded here of the way Rothbard put it, and I basically paraphrase. He said that, the state is a robber baron that will just plunder its victims until there's nothing left to plunder. And then once it's plundered everything there is to plunder, it just dies, right? It's killed its own food source. It's like a parasite that kills the host. So, it's kind of an unfortunate state of affairs, but, thank God for Bitcoin, because I don't know what we would do in the face of this rising tide of global communism if it were not for Bitcoin.